Next, please. So welcome to this press conference at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. And of course a special welcome to this year's Nobel laureates. My name is Hans Ellegren, Secretary General of the Academy. Closest to me you find this year's laureates in physics, Professors John Clark, Michel Deboué, and John Martinez. And next to them, the Nobel laureates in chemistry, Professors Susumu Kitagawa and Omar Yagi. Professor Richard Robson, also a laureate in chemistry, could not make it to here. He is elderly and needs his rest. Next to the laureates in chemistry is the laureates in economic sciences, Professors Joël Moncur, Philippe Aguillon, and Professor Peter Howitt. During this press conference, you may ask questions to one or several of the laureates and take the opportunity to hear their views about their research and their achievements and how they perceive getting the prize. Please ask your questions in English and please ask one question at a time. One question at a time. We start the press conference, and who would like to start? Take it there.
My question to Professor Joël Moncur. You spent 50 years of your life exploring how grow startup. Why is stopped in Europe, maybe except Poland? And to Professor Aguillon, should we nationalize big companies, big tech companies? Thank you.
So, what has happened in Europe in the last 15 or 20 years is that growth has slowed down considerably. I think if you measured it correctly and took account of product quality improvements and new products, there probably has still been a fair amount of growth, but certainly not as much as there used to be. And I think there's not a single cause that you can attribute it to. To my way of thinking, what is really hidden and not quite expressed in the national statistics is the fact that Europe is rich. Living standards are good, and people want to have fun in life. And one of the ways you have fun is you have leisure, you work less. If you work less, you produce less, and then economic growth slows down. But if we took account of leisure in a national income account, then actually growth would be considerably better than it really is. When I talk to my European colleagues, the interesting thing is they're either just come back from vacation or they're just about to go to vacation. And I think that sort of symbolizes, I think, one of the things that's happening in Europe. The other factor, of course, is that there's an aging process of the population. The number of people in the working force relative to the people who are retired is going down, and that means participation rates are lower, and that too will affect GDP. But on the whole, my sense is life in Europe today is probably better than almost anywhere else in the world. So have a wonderful time, everybody, and enjoy your riches.
I will complete the answer. I love Joel's answer. I think in Europe we have a big problem too. We had catching up growth between 1945 and the mid-80s. It was very much based on we had to rebuild our capital stock, and we caught up with the technological revolution that took place in the US in the early 20th century. It was very much catching up. But then we exhausted the power of catching up, and we failed to move into frontier innovation fully, and to take advantage of the IT revolution first. And why is that? First, we don't have a true single market. In fact, the European market is divided. You have the practice of gold plating. Each country, each member state has its own regulation. So we don't have the rents to innovators are not the same as in the US or China. We have a divided market, okay, for goods and services. So the second reason, we don't have a proper financial ecosystem for frontier innovation. For frontier innovation, you need to encourage risk-taking and venture capital, institutional and investors. We don't have enough of that in Europe. Sweden being an exception. You do much better than everybody else in Europe when it comes to institutional investors. And we don't have the equivalent of DARPA, a way to reconcile industrial policy and competition policy. You see, DARPA is a way to say in some sectors you need to make big action like defense, energy, biotech, and it's a pro-competition way to do industrial policy. In the US, they have the Defense Advanced Project Agency, or the BARDA, which was the equivalent for vaccines. That's how we are all here. In China also, they have their own ways to reconcile industrial policy and competition policy. We don't have such things in Europe. So those are the dimensions where we need to work. And the whole problem, on the research, we have the European Research Council. But I have to tell you that some people want to put their hands on it. And we need to perennize and augment the power of ERC. ERC is probably the best news that happened to research-based innovation in Europe. And some people want to, stop or to. There is danger on ERC. We should perennize. We should permanent ERC. We should make it fully independent and increase the scope of the European Research Council. I think that's. I'm sorry to be a bit long.
Okay. Here, please.
Thank you. I'm Jido from Bilibili, and I have two questions to ask. First, my question is for Professor Yaki. Mofs have shown advantages in drug delivery and biomedicine, such as acting as non-drugs for tumor drugs. So when Mofs are implanted into the human body, the long-term biodegradation products may interact with human cells in unpredictable ways. Have you considered the ethical threshold for Mofs application in clinical medicine? For example, what level of long-term safety data is enough to push more drugs to clinical trials? And second question.
We take one question at a time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, Mofs are solids. They are not soluble. They don't dissolve. So they're like basically rocks, powdered rocks. So they're very stable, and that gives them the properties that one needs for them to be deployed, let's say, as we have shown, in harvesting water from air to make drinking water, or taking CO2 out of the air. You need to use the material over and over again for many, many years. I think that's important to note. There is some research right now in using Mofs that may not be as stable, that could release, let's say, cargo into a cell, but this is still at the research stage. This has not been fully applied. So I think your question pertains to once this technology reaches, let's say, drug delivery stage, and it's commercialized or about to be commercialized, then there will be a lot of studies pertaining to the question.
Polish TV.
Thank you very much. My name is Bogdan Radomski from Polish TV. I want to ask about innovation, which Professor Nio already mentioned. All of this year's prizes are about innovations, about discoveries that led to major innovative technological breakthroughs, and about the importance of innovation in terms of economic growth. So I'd like to ask about the importance of funding research, also basic research, which sometimes only leads to innovation after many, many years, and whether you see any potential threats to this kind of innovation-oriented policy with the ongoing discussion about science funding and, freedom of scientific content in certain countries. Thank you very much.
Who would like to answer that? You heard Professor Aguillon comment on ERC.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be very important that ERC becomes fully independent, like the European Central Bank is independent, and have permanent funding. Also, ERC, they give grants for 1 year or 5 years. I think it would be very important to have funding for 10 years to labs. For example, in the US, they have public and private foundations that fund new research on a 10-year basis. If you want, you see, the big thing in Europe is really you need to encourage failure in the short run and reward long-term success. And that there, it's so important to have long-term funding. So to fund research labs over a 10-year period. We don't have enough in Europe to fund, labs on a 10-year basis. And it's been very interesting in France. That's one of a few things that work in France. It's not only rare. There was an initiative to fund labs, laboratoires d'excellence, over a 10-year period. It had a big impact on breakthrough innovation in neighboring industries to the labs. That's a study that was done there. There are many things we tried in France, like the research factory that failed. There was no effect. But that thing, funding labs on a long-term basis, had significant effect on breakthrough innovation by neighboring industries. And I think we should try to generalize that and increase the scope of ERC, because ERC has, should be managing this program. Sorry.
Can I just add one sentence to this answer? So I think Philippe was absolutely right about this. What is happening in the US, however, is something quite different, which is I think there is a shift back from government funding to private funding of basic science. And I point to organizations, say like the Gates Foundation, for instance, which is taking advantage of the emergence of enormous personal fortunes of people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and so on and so forth. And basically, these people have amassed so much money that they can actually take care of the kind of funding that previously was done by things like the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health, which in recent years seems to have been cut back by Congress and by the executive. And in a way, that has profound implications for which direction science is going, but I probably wouldn't venture to say whether this is a positive or a negative development, depending on what these private people want. So I think the Gates Foundation has done incredibly good work on things like tropical diseases, for instance, and other things.
Professor Devoré, do you want to comment on the funding situation?
I could comment. When we did this experiment in 1985, this was funded through Lawrence Berkeley Lab, John Clark's lab, and a very fundamental research program, and that enabled us to do this experiment quite easily and do it. Over the years, as we left, it was more we had to make proposals to the U.S. government, but very much in the DARPA model, there was good funding over many years to develop the technology. And then in the later years, private industry took over. I moved to Google, now I have my own startup, and then I have, you have funding through the private sector. I think we have a wide variety of funding sources, but obviously, as you go to the DARPA or the private funding, that's going to be more directed research, trying to build a product. But still at the fundamental levels, that's always an issue, and I agree, long-term funding, it really would help you there.
Okay, we take another question. Yes, please, there, you, the lady.
Hello, I'm Corina Negra from Radio Romania, Science Department. This is a question for Professor Mochir. I would like to ask you if your theory is applicable for countries who are not financing basic research in one hand and that are not producing technology actually. So can this be possible? Can economical growth is possible? Is economical growth possible in countries that are not producing technology and are only buying technologies and who are not funding basic research?
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, the wealth effect from new technology doesn't come from developing it, it comes from applying it. And there's absolutely nothing in the world that prevents countries from adopting inventions made elsewhere and applying them successfully. I would point to the case of Switzerland. Now, Switzerland actually has been from bad mouth, but I had a teacher once said that the only thing that the Swiss ever invented was the cuckoo clock. And even that turned out to be incorrect because the cuckoo clock was invented in Bavaria. You should all know this. But in fact, Switzerland got rich on using technologies that were developed in England, in Germany, and elsewhere. And the same is true to a great degree in the Netherlands. There are very few great Dutch inventors. I could list a few, but there tend to be few of them. But the Netherlands is extremely rich by applying successfully inventions made elsewhere. On the other hand, in Britain, which is still a very inventive country, which there's a lot of frontier science going on, but in fact their ability to apply things in our own time has been much more limited than on the continent. And so I would think that particularly countries, say, like Romania and other countries in Eastern Europe, adopting technology made elsewhere is going to work for them. After all, this is the source of success, of economic success of Japan for a century, and for China until recently, essentially did the same thing. And so you can get very wealthy on inventions made elsewhere, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's probably more efficient because you don't have to pay the cost of development.
May I ask Professor Kitagawa, do you want to comment on the funding situation in Japan?
Yes, basically the governmental funding have the three categories. First one is the very fundamental one. The second is just fundamental to the application level. The final is strategic the funding, in particular in the deep tech and so on and so forth. So in the fundamental case, many people said it takes a long time. So the fundamental funding means it kind of 25 years or something is better. But the government cannot be patient. But still Japan set up the 10 years funding. This is quite nice because the very fundamental achievement, yeah, so in the science level, it's in the 25 years or so. So this achievement to the transfer to the society, it takes 25 years. So in the three categories, in the fundamental case, it should be the long-term funding. And the strategic case is just 5 years or so. So Japan is doing this type of having this type of categories. So I recommend many times I recommend the government to increase more fundamental research funding.
Okay, another question. Shall we take there?
I would like to ask questions to Professor Kitagawa and Professor Yagi, and I'm from the Asahi Shimbun, the Japanese daily newspaper. And Professor Kitagawa said that we are entering the era of gases. And how do you think this metal-organic frameworks will be put in practice in the future, and what kind of society do you expect to become?
Yeah, we both agree on the fact that Mofs are extremely good at attracting gases, separating gases, for example, from the air, CO2 from the air, water from the air to make drinking water, and we can make the Mofs to be stable, that they don't leach into the water that ultimately would be used for drinking or for other purposes. That has already been proven. And my colleague Susumu calls it the gas economy, and I call it also the air economy. Says it's about the same thing. And we have the materials that can contain and can trap and concentrate gases in ways that has never been done before. So I think that this is a great vision, and it's beginning to be realized because, for example, some Mofs are now being applied in capturing CO2 from flue gas. And we have also shown that some of these materials could also trap CO2 from air. This is in addition to the water harvesting accomplishment that is already about to be commercialized. So I think, yes, we live in the age of Mofs, And we live in the age of the gas economy, the air economy.
Please, over there.
I am Douyin creator and also PhD student from China. I want to ask proof direct with AI tools developing rapidly, so they can perform data processing and complex analysis. So the question is that what's left for scientists to do in the future? Thank you.
Who would like to address that?
Sir, can you? Sorry.
Maybe you can repeat in short.
What can you do? What?
I want to ask with AI tools rapidly developing. So
AI?
Yes, they can process data and they can do complex analysis. So what's left for our scientists to do in the future? So formulating good ideas or just solving?
No. If I can answer this question, I think that what we have not seen is that AI is not asking the questions. I think the very important role of a scientist is to ask questions. We've seen AI to give only answers, but sometimes the most important thing is to create the questions.
I also think that it's the creativity of the scientists that is really quite special. Now, whether AI can solve that, I don't know. I'll just give you a recent example. Google wrote a very nice paper a few weeks ago, and frankly, it was very hard for me to understand that paper. However, I did look at a Google Notebook LLM to kind of translate and simplify, and I found that was quite good, kind of stripping out all the side issues and really getting to the issues. And I understood the paper much better, but not very well. And then the Google group posted a 2-page archive paper where they kind of explained it in a much more clear manner. So there is an example, I think, of where human creativity far surpassed what you could do with the large language models, which are have their limitations. Now, we don't know where that's going, but I think from the scientific realm, the creativity and asking the questions, as Michelle said, is something that should be around for a long time.
Professor Clark, I have a question for you. You have been...
Can I say who is speaking?
No, it's me. I believe you have been called the godfather of superconducting electronics. When you did the first experiments back in 1980s, could you foresee that eventually this might be the way towards quantum computers?
No, I think not. But I'd like to emphasize something.
Please use the mic there.
Oh. It's so far away from what I have to say. I mean, the work was really done by my two colleagues, by John Martinez and by Michel Devereux. And I think to say that I did it is a misunderstanding. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But the two of you, could you foresee that the ones will be the start of the quantum computer?
Yeah, at the time I was just trying to do a good thesis project and answer a fundamental question. At the end of my thesis, we went to a conference in Santa Barbara where Richard Feynman talked about quantum computing, which I think completely expanded our minds, and seeing how everyone mobbed him afterwards with questions made us realize that was a great question. Like Michelle said, you have to ask good questions. And I think I had an inkling of what would happen, but how big it's grown has really surprised me, and how deep we've been able to grow in the physics over the 40 years is quite amazing to me.
I believe we have to stop there. Thank you for your interest in coming here. There will be individual questions taken afterwards. It's only 10 months left until we announce the 2026 prizes. So thank you for coming.